expressed explicitly or contend for matrimony. You student loans to pay, it will not risk the alimony.
My name's Star, and let's see. I just went back to high school. I'm 32, and I went back to high school, so that's a thing.
My name is Marcus Creaghan, and I've been in the caves of the Bay of Fundy, which is the highest tide in the world.
My name is Andre, and I want to push back against this whole interesting thing. I'm not sure, interesting, that's a very subjective category. I think the Bay of Fundy thing is very interesting. I think that's a very interesting thing. I think that's an interesting fact about Marcus. I would not have guessed that. Other people may not find that interesting. I don't know. But I'm going to follow from Marcus and say that I once stayed in a cave in Cappadocia for a while. And while I was in this cave, I became paranoid that I was going to get that sickness you get from mouse droppings. I was sleeping just on the ground, and I woke up one night and I was terrified I was going to just die here in this cave in Turkey of mouse dropping disease. I don't know if that's interesting, but it says a lot about me.
I like people. I think they're interesting, and I like psychology, and so I'm really into rare psychological and obscure psychological disorders, especially right now, or aspects of psychological disorders. So that's what's inspiring to me for my novels for the most part, and stories could be anything.
This is not going to make me sound any better, but voices, like I'm imitative. I hear a voice of a character before I start, and usually I expand from that.
Tell me more.
I'd rather not. I feel like the more I go into it, the more insane I will sound, and then you'll just become unusually interested in me.
I think it's a deep sense of jealousy often. There's this book by Leopold Marechal, who's a Chilean writer, and or not Chilean, Argentinian writer. And I've only gotten 10 pages into it because every time I start reading it, I become so jealous of his facility with language that I am no longer capable of reading further, and then I have to go write something, which will then be inferior to what I've read, but it's a large part of it.
I just finished a book by Andrew Kaufman called All My Friends Are Superheroes, which I very much enjoyed. And my favorite authors, I enjoy Amy Bender a lot. Like, if I had to pick one, I'd say I really like her stuff because it's very subtle, magical, sort of weird stuff, which I like. I like a variety of different things. I more like books than authors usually, so I have a lot of favorite books, but not so many authors.
Right now I am reading a illustrated history of Japan by artist by the name of Shigeru Mizuki, and what was the second part again? Oh, favorite writer. I tend to gravitate towards people who can do things that I can't, and that makes me think of Anne Carson right now. I couldn't write anything she's written.
Yeah, I'm rereading Mariana Pasqualini's book Sofrosini right now, and it's so good. It's an incredibly good book, and I talked to her once, and she said it took her 4 years to write. And it's like 130 pages, but like every single sentence is flawless. I read an excerpt from a novel I'm working on about somebody. Well, the excerpt I read is about somebody struggling to write a thesis, which is an experience I'm sure most of us have had. The experience of EW was very good. It's a wonderful crowd, and I think the drink tickets help. Both the readers and the audience.
I can't remember the title of what I read. I kind of Frankensteined it out of a number of different things that were thematically related, and then passed it off as like unity.
Convincing.
Convincingly. I think it was called. Running was in the title. And the experience was great. A bunch of my friends were there, and got to drink with them afterwards, and it was magnificent.
I read a story called How Can We Ever Be Better? And it's sort of like a fairy tale sort of type thing. And the experience was great. I loved it. I thought everyone was really friendly and welcoming, and it was lovely.
It could be argued that it's already a disaster. But if I had to stick to the natural world, maybe. I know. I feel like as a young writer, I have this anxiety to perform. It's kind of related to your thing about jealousy. I think we were actually talking about this after the reading, but you feel like you have no authority or no right to be writing, so you try to overwhelm that feeling by laying on craft really heavily. Like you have to make sure every paragraph is like this incredibly evocative, overly written masterpiece. So I would say like a flood. That's what I'm like.
Andre.
Maybe a Chinook. I mean, Chinooks are usually touted as being this wonderful thing, but I don't think they are. I think Chinook sort of reminds you that summer exists in the middle of winter, and then winter comes back. There's something, about the inability to actually complete anything.
I'm gonna go with tornado. As I said, I like to think for a long period of time, and I feel like you can kind of see from the distance the tornado forming, and everyone kind of gathers and goes, "Is that a funnel cloud? I don't know." And you get all sort of freaked out, and then it starts swirling, and you're like, "Oh shit, here it comes!" And then I'll just write really fast, and like everything will come out, and usually it's really disastrous and depressing. Like the kind of stuff I like to write about is very like destruction related and death related and psychological illness related. So kind of happens, and then it's over, and then I'm left going, "Oh shit, there's my house. It's in ruins." I'd probably say just being able to not do anything else. Because since I write very quickly and in sort of like many days, I usually just sit down and don't stop, and I can't get out of it. So if I could just have like a little manservant, I'm looking at my husband right now, to come forth and give me food while I'm working, and that would be great.
I don't know. Is this like a date day, or
However you want to answer it.
however I want to answer it? I would rather not answer it at all. I think the perfect day would be maybe just spent traveling, because when I'm on transportation, it's usually a good time for me to write.
This summer I was visiting a friend of mine in the Magdalen Islands, which are in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and I had this idea that I'd hole up in his cabin for a few days and I'd get all this writing done. And it was actually really, it was a horrible experience, but it was really good because all the locals living on this tiny island, because I was, new person, would come, and they would, come into the cottage and try and talk to me. And because the last thing I wanted to do is talk to any of these, fisher folk, I would have to be writing all the time, because if they came in and saw me like doing the dishes, then they would just sit down and like have a cup of tea and talk at me. So I literally had to be constantly writing in order to fend off these lobster fishermen and their questions about the gays and what they do in the big city.
What the gays do in the big city?
Oh,
or?
they were really, really concerned about this.
Okay.
So what did you tell them?
Well, I said, I'm busy writing right now. I can't. I don't have time to talk to you about your prejudices.
I saw something vaguely on social media. You had some exciting career news recently.
Career?
Did you get an agent or something?
I did, yes.
Wow,
I did.
congratulations.
Thank you. we've been working hard on my first book.
That's so cool.
So it's very exciting. Yeah, it's a very, very long process that I never learned about until just now. It's good though. It's good.
Book Vacuum is a literary podcast based in Toronto. I am a host, as well as Andre Babin, who's a former EW writer, I believe. Yes, he is. And we interview writers in Toronto and talk to them for about half an hour. You can find it on iTunes or bookvacuum.squarespace.com. And you should.
Nonfiction is my bread and butter. Like I work as a writer, and I find the relationship between nonfiction and fiction very interesting because, you know, there's the old sort of postmodern adage about how everything's actually fiction, but working as a reporter really does underline that. Like there's so much that there's so much that's kind of required by a story, and you kind of end up fitting the truth into a narrative that people are going to are kind of expecting. Yeah, so the problem there is that there are still rules in nonfiction you kind of have to abide by because it affects people's lives. But I don't know. I mean, I think fiction affects people's lives too. You know, there's this whole thing about people putting out a book and other people seeing themselves in it or getting concerned about, you know, how close is this to life or whatever. So I think it's one of those intractable problems. As a writer, you're always dealing with trust, and you're always dealing with the stories of people around you. And in nonfiction, that's more explicit than in fiction. And I think maybe in fiction it would be kind of helpful sometimes to know, like, what is the right thing to do when you have a story that's very personal to you, but also personal to other people. Are you allowed to tell that? Is that just your story, or is it everyone's story? And if so, what do you do? With nonfiction, it's a lot clearer what the right thing to do is. Fiction, it's a lot messier.